Hello, and welcome to the League of Josh podcast. My name is Joshua, and I am your host. This episode was recorded on May 25th, 2021. Today I'm joined by Matthew Primrose. Prim and I have known each other for about 5 years now. I first met Prim at a Pursuit Volley youth camp when he was the oldest camper at the ripe age of 19. Since then, I have come to understand why a 19-year-old would pay to play with a bunch of 12 to 17-year-olds. In short, it was sheer determination and triumph of the will. Later that year, Prim would walk on to play with the University of Lethbridge Kodiak's men's volleyball team, earning a starting spot and winning a provincial silver medal during his time there. Prim then chose to step outside of his comfort zone and move to Saskatoon, where he made an instant impact with the University of Saskatchewan Huskies. Prim is now finishing his studies in history and sociology, entering into an Honours of History next year. In this episode, Prim and I discuss resilience and determination, as well as the importance of learning about the past to best influence our future. I can comfortably say that Prim is one of the hardest workers and best teammates I've been blessed to share the court with. I hope that you enjoy in sharing our conversation. Okay, so I'm sitting here with Matthew Primrose, and Prim or Matthew? Prim?
Yeah, Prim's good, yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
Prim.
I'm super chill about anything.
Yeah. Prim is a alumni at Lethbridge College as a Kodiak volleyball player. And what medal did you get at Nationals while you were there?
Oh man, Nationals. Yeah, we didn't make it that far.
No?
No. So yeah, I think my last year there we made it to the provincial final. But because Red Deer was hosting, they automatically got a bye. So you had to win provincials, and we lost to Keanu in the final. So we ended up getting a silver medal at provincials. I think obviously any other year we would have gone to nationals and hopefully done pretty well, but yeah, unfortunately just got a silver medal.
Was that within the past couple of years that they went to nationals then?
Yeah.
Okay. I thought
sorry. No, they so again last year they hosted provs like Lethbridge College did.
Yeah.
Or I guess like the last season that was available to play, like not this COVID season. So yeah, Lethbridge hosted provincials, and again they lost in the finals, and then they went to nationals, and I think they got third or fourth, something like that. So yeah, that was the last season. But unfortunately, I was with unfortunately or fortunately, I was with the University of Saskatchewan Huskies. So
right, I thought you were still part of that group, but
no, unfortunately not.
Mistake. I make a lot of those.
That's right.
So thanks for being patient.
That's all right.
So now, segueing into the next part of your life, now you're a participant of the University of Saskatchewan Huskies men's volleyball team, and you're currently taking a major in history with a minor in sociology and going into your history honors next year.
Correct. Yep.
So today we'll be talking a little bit about volleyball and the pursuit of greatness, in your case, both athletic and academic.
Beauty.
And where you came from, how you started to play volleyball, how you got into the collegiate stream, and then towards the end, maybe we'll talk a little bit more about history, as that's your passion.
Sure. Yeah, sounds good, man.
All right, let's start off with the small town grinders, the both dying breed and up and coming breed, I think. It seems as though the small town attitude is becoming more and more successful in especially volleyball. As I look at the provincial rankings and I see that the small towns are coming back up. It was about 10 years ago that Lethbridge would be in the finals consistently, and then that kind of died off throughout my age group, and now it's starting to come back again. So can you tell me a little bit about your experience getting into volleyball and then being the scrappy small town chip on your shoulder team always for some reason?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, yeah, it was crazy because so I grew up in Lethbridge, Alberta, and in Lethbridge and Southern Alberta in general during my time frame. So like I graduated high school in 2015. The sports of choice were really basketball and football. So a lot of my friends, went to scholarships for both basketball and football, and that was kind of the thing. Volleyball wasn't really like quote unquote cool during that time frame. And there wasn't anybody, at least from LCI, that I could really look up to in the past couple of years that had gone to go play post-secondary volleyball. The only guy that I know from Lethbridge that did that was Keith West, and he went to Chinook. And Keith was like this freak of nature, amazing volleyball player, right? Like he was just so naturally gifted. It was hard to try to compare myself to him because he was just that good. So it wasn't a lot of, I don't know, I guess knowledge about the sport in the sense of trying to go post-secondary or how to go about it. So a lot of us that were like passionate about the game really didn't have like an idea or an opportunity, I guess, to go right away. So I ended up, how I got to the college, I ended up actually taking a year off from sport. Not that I was getting recruited in the first place. Like I wasn't, people should know this, like I was a middle in high school for my high school team, which is like a 3A team, which is absurd to think about because yeah, like, I don't know, it just doesn't make sense. So obviously I wasn't getting recruited by anybody, not even college teams. And so I ended up just taking a year off, and I thought I was done with sports because if no one was coming down, knocking down my door, which I thought that's how it kind of worked. I guess I wasn't good enough to go, so I'll just go to university. So I started in like the pre-education program at University of Lethbridge, thinking I wanted to be a teacher. And about halfway through, kind of into January or February, I just really thought, like, man, this sucks. And I'm not dogging university life because I actually love the University of Lethbridge, but there's a part of me that was missing something. And I eventually found out that part was volleyball. I missed the competitiveness about it, and I don't know, like the culture around it was fun because some of your best friends come from sport, right? And so, yeah, I mean, the next like 5 to 7 months, I just continually like grinded, like you were saying, like the small town grinder. My one friend, Keen Josettis, he was trying to make the basketball team at the college. And my plan was I'll get in shape because I was out of shape. I'll play a bunch of beach because there's no courts that you can play on in Lethbridge, really. You could just like, it's crazy. Like in Edmonton, you can just go play rec volleyball. In Lethbridge, that's a very, 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 even today, it's beginning to pick up, but it's still quite a rarity. And so there's some beach happening during the summer that, I'll just try to get some touches. My plan was just to walk onto the college, and then, kind of by the grace of God, I guess that kind of happened in the end, that I was able to walk on. But there's a lot of moving pieces in between that allowed that to happen. So yeah, I don't know. It was very tough, and I think I had to kind of give up my education in a sense at that point because I did leave the University of Lethbridge and go to the college and kind of start my way from the bottom and work my way to the top again. So it was very daunting, but it was super, super worth it, obviously, because it's kind of worked out in the end. But yeah, that's kind of how I made it to the college, at least.
Okay, so you start off in the middle, and for anyone who's not well versed in volleyball, the middle is the big tall guy
yeah.
that can't really pass. Or in my experience, I played with Sam Taylor Parks, who is probably one of the best middle passers I've ever seen.
Yeah.
But normally you can't pass, you can't really play defense, you stay out of the back row, and that's what you played. And now you are a very high level libero, which is only in the back row. So you've done a little bit of a 50-50 swap.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
that was your college. You did win a provincial championship in 3A.
No, so we
didn't
even it's all right, man. It's okay.
Are you on your zone?
We went to the zone final again. The thing is, Josh, you're thinking that I'm some like elite dude. I never won a darn thing, I don't think, in anything in volleyball. But that's okay. Just stabbing at me a little. No, it's fine.
A lot of silvers.
Yeah, a lot of silvers. Yeah. So we went to the zone final again, and for whatever reason, the zone champion won, or got to go to Provs, and we faced McGrath. And so a great athlete in Carter Hansen, I played with at the college. I think he's the kill leader for the ACAC, like all time, or like Lethbridge College, something like that. So very talented individual. He was on the McGrath team and ended up beating us. And then in my grade 12 year, I don't even think we had a a shot at going to Provs, but that's okay. You know,
Okay, on your
we,
Instagram,
we
there's a
move.
photo of you holding a banner. Where's that from?
That's so we were dominant at basketball, man.
Okay, so you're a
we were good at
basketball
basketball.
champ.
Yeah. So we were a good school at basketball. I think so we won our zones, and then I think we came third in provincials uh, against like some dominant Edmonton and Calgary teams. So yeah, that's where that photo's from.
Okay,
Unfortunately.
so I'm only mostly wrong then.
Yeah. You're still like you're in the ballpark.
Yeah, that'll feed my ego a little bit. I didn't strike
Yeah.
out completely. So on that same vein of thought, you start off as a middle, end up playing libero in
Right.
college and university, and along that way you take a year off of volleyball because no one recruited you, and then you
Right.
decide through force of sheer will, changing your shape from circle to box or rectangle, you end
Yeah.
up walking on and being a starter on the college team. So
Right.
I don't think it would be unreasonable for me to insinuate that you shouldn't be here, at least from the perspective of others. Lots of people would look at you and say, well, obviously they waved you off for a few years, and
Yeah.
only through triumph of the will you were able to thwart the statements of you shouldn't be here. So how do you deal with that
Right.
now, and how do you carry that with you?
That's a good question. I mean, it was always just my passion. It was something I wanted to do, and I really just set that goal um, to try to go as far in the sport as I could. And so I had a lot of help along the way, or a lot of people that did support me, right? So like my mom, you're gonna get me emotional here, but my mom is like my biggest support in my life, right? I think, you know, there's so many people, even when I was trying to, or I was thinking about walking onto the college and like dropping out of university and you know going to Lethbridge College. There's so many people that are like, I don't know, man. Like 5-year degree, you can be set, you can start a family, do all this stuff. It'll be super easy. But my mom was like, whatever you want to do in your life, you have to go out and do that. So she was my biggest support. Without her, I don't think. Well, I know for a fact none of this is possible. So I just kind of kept that in mind. Like as long as she was like a supporting factor in this, I knew that whatever I was trying to achieve, it couldn't be wrong, right? I don't think if you can try to chase your passion and it's truly your passion, I don't know if that ever can be considered wrong. So for the people that, I don't know, kind of thought you shouldn't be here, you're not good enough, or there's X, Y, Z as to why, I don't know, you shouldn't be here. I don't, it's going to sound arrogant, but I don't really care about their opinion because like, it's not their life, right? I don't worry about what they're doing in their daily life. In fact, like more power to you. Like if you want to try to prove me wrong or, you know, dig me off the court or whatever, like go out and try to do that. But yeah, I think my circle is small for a reason. And so, those that do support me show great love and support that just kind of overpowers all the negativity that filters through. So hopefully that kind of answers your question.
Mm-hmm. I've really been trying to put my finger on unhappiness, not exactly unhappiness. I think unhappiness is very transient, and so maybe a lack of fulfillment in people's lives, which lead to a state of emotional drought and emotional shut-offness.
Right.
I just finished a course on resilience, and a big factor was a thing that I started to wonder about was why people are content with their lives in some circumstances and not others. So for example, with the amount of material satisfaction that we've had over the past 100 years, which has been remarkable to any standard, the reduction of poverty worldwide has been exponential and increasingly growing. So, and at the same time, in very well-developed countries, particularly individualistic communities and the more individualistic centered countries. So you could say Western culture to some extent, but that doesn't include every single Western country.
Right.
that in those countries, in those groups, a happiness index, especially children, would rate lower and lower. So I'd like to understand your reasoning for not pursuing the 5-year degree out of the university and
Right.
taking a huge risk by going the route of volleyball, because it seems as though you gave up monetary and life security for a spiritual journey, for lack of a better term.
Right. Yeah, I mean, for me, and this is just something that I always told myself, is that because I was so connected through sports throughout my whole life, I've always been connected to sport. And volleyball was kind of the pathway that allowed me to continue in that sport. I always told myself, well, if I have an opportunity right now to play volleyball at the age of, I think I was 19 when I first started up again, and let's say I go till I'm 30, I can always go back and obtain a degree later on, is what I told myself. And I think, actually in university, I took a class and there was an 86-year-old man that was like a retired individual who he just wanted to learn more about history. And so I always respected him because, he could sit at home and just, um, go about his daily life of carefreeness and just be settled, I guess. But he decided to choose to continue to learn. And so I always thought if I ever had the opportunity to play sport when I was young, I would do it, because it's not like I could go and try to walk onto a college team when I'm even 30, 40, 50, right? Like, I don't think my body would handle it. My
I was
body's
going to say,
still struggling with it right now.
well, you could try. We're not sure how long
Yeah,
you last.
exactly. And like how much growth I could have in that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I figured this was the time to do it, if there was going to be a time, because I don't know. I think some opportunities only pass by way or pass you. How's that saying go? Like they only happen once in a lifetime, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's only like there's only a certain amount of time in which you have to kind of go through these opportunities. So for me, it was really simple, as hard as that sounds. And it's not like I didn't battle. Like, am I doing the right thing? What does my family think? Is my mom supporting me? But deep down, she's like, man, I really could, I need some help. Our bills piling up. And that's why I always tried to really, really work at my academics on top of my athletic scholarships, because if I could try to go to university for as little money as possible, and I could supplement that with playing volleyball, anybody that thought this was, kind of financially draining, I could just justify that in my mind. Well, at least I'm going to school for almost free, right? At least I'm going to school for like a reduced price, because, I'm not being lazy with my academic work. So, yeah, I don't know. It definitely is tough, and there are definitely moments in life where you think, well, man, I'm just doing the wrong thing, or this is not what I'm meant to be doing. But um, I don't know. Then there's moments throughout the whole journey that you're just reminded of yourself that, yeah, this is what you're kind of meant to do.
How do you deal with that? That sounds like a relationship with yourself, but also with someone else, where relationships will ebb and flow and you'll like each other
Right.
more depending on the time and the circumstance. But occasionally there's the
Right.
light that you experience within the darkness,
Mm-hmm.
where you realize
Mm-hmm.
that you do want to be there at that time. And I would like to know how you deal with that psychologically, where you
Yeah.
understand that the person or yourself, that there are other options. And
Right.
something that I've found consistent through the resilience research is the benefit of a 2-parent household.
Right.
And so
Oh,
there's
very cool.
something, it's unbelievable, actually.
Mm-hmm.
It's absolutely insane, and it makes a lot of sense. And it seems like an institution that's been a social norm for millennia,
For
for a
sure. Yeah.
very, very long time. And we've only recently started to break out of it. And I think we're starting to understand why it's a social norm. I actually watched, there was a little there was a clip of a podcast that I had seen a while ago where people were talking about the reasons for marriage, and they said that outside of the social constraint or the social taboo of not being married, there's not really a reason to be married. And that makes a lot of sense if you don't look into the literature at all, because you would assume I don't need a piece of paper to tell someone that I love them.
Right.
But something that I really liked from Carl Jung was that marriage is a way to chain yourself to someone else, so that you actually have to figure out how to live with them instead of moving from one fundamentally flawed but sufficient enough at the moment person to the next fundamentally flawed but sufficient enough person at the moment. And
Right.
Freud actually,
Very cool.
yeah, Freud talks a lot about, there was a book he wrote called Civilization and Its Discontents. And in that he talked about eros, which is the Greek concept of love. And it boils more down to creation and a platonic love than a romantic love. And a part of that was that eros and the creation of the child is something that bonds two people together to such an extent that the child actually supersedes the love between the two people, and the love experience for the
Very cool.
child is something that chains the two people to each other because of the inherent benefit from having both parents. And so,
Wow.
anyways, how do you experience that relationship with yourself, where it's something that you want to do, where you feel as though there's something potentially more out there, or you're not on the right path, that everyone has self-doubts, everyone questions themselves, and
Right.
how do you reify your decision to be where you are?
Yeah. So for me, it's always been um, like my ultimate goal. I think my ultimate goal in life is different than my athletic goal. So my ultimate goal in life is to always take care of the ones that love me, specifically my family, specifically my mom. You can break it down that way. So to be honest, if volleyball ever got in the way of me being able to take care of my family, I would quit. Because at the end of the day, um, you know, those people are going to be with you for the longevity of your life. Whereas volleyball, at least from a playing standpoint, is only going to be with you, at least in my life, maybe 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing is, if they're supportive of that and they accept that you're kind of on this journey, I set this goal that my ultimate goal with volleyball is to go play professional volleyball. I've kind of stated that as my goal for quite some time. And it's a very scary goal, especially as a libero, and people have to kind of be around the sport to understand like why it's so daunting. But so for me, that end goal continues to make me drive within the sport. And so while there are times in which, like, I loved playing for Lethbridge College, it was awesome. I was super, super comfortable. Um, like they put me on a bus in the city. So it was like, I don't know, I felt like a small town rock star. You know what I mean? Like, it was awesome. I was super, super comfortable.
Oh, you're on the
But
outside
then,
of the bus.
yeah, on the outside of the bus. Yeah. So like driving down my neighborhood, and then like there's Prim. Like that's super cool. My nan would like wait outside her window, hoping that the bus would go by. That's cool. That's
That's so
awesome,
fun.
right?
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's so fun. And um, but then after that provincials, where some universities started to contact me, you have to make a decision, right? Do you stay in that comfortability zone, or do you venture off 7 hours away from home in freezing cold Saskatoon to try to grow your athletic skill? And I left because I thought that's what I needed to do to grow, not only as an athlete but as a human, or as a man for sure. And yeah, I mean that was kind of my decision, my choice, to just keep trusting the process, as cliche as that might sound as well, right? Like there's going to be times where even in your normal life, right, you might not even be in sports, but it might be in your educational studies, or it might be just within your own family unit, that you guys are going to go through some tough times. It's not all sunshine and rainbows, right? But you have to continue to trust the process to keep working towards that end goal. And so the end goal of me playing pro has always been there. So that's why I continue to go back every year and beat up my body. So that's what my end goal was, right? To try to get out there. So yeah.
Well, it's good to have a big lofty goal in mind.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
On that note, how do you seek opportunities rather than have opportunities come and find you? For one example, I remember in a Lethbridge camp, it was a pursuit Lethbridge camp, and you showed up, and you were, just to give some kind of reference to anyone listening, these camps tend to have kids from, say, 12 or 13 to around 17, 18. It normally maxes out around there. And I believe you were
19.
You were exceeding the age category for sure. And you just showed up and you came and asked Ken, "Hey, do you mind if I play in this camp?" And he went, "Okay, sure. I don't see why not." And for anyone listening, everyone plays together at these camps. So the goal is to just toss a big mixed bag of ages and skill levels onto a court, and there's a regression to the mean of kids tend to get very good at these camps because they're exposed to very high level volleyball for what they're used to. And so that's kind of the model that Ken's gone after. And so you were a leader at this camp, but it was outside of the norm of age groups. I don't think we'd ever seen anything like that up until that point. So you were just someone that wanted to get better and wanted the opportunity. And so you showed up. And why would you do that? Just so many people. I just think that would be so. And I mean, I'm not taking the piss out of you.
No.
Like I think it was one of the most commendable things that I've ever seen, actually, because you were someone who completely put your ego to the side and said, "I'm just going to go play. I'm just going to go have fun. I'm just going to go learn. That's what I'm here for. That's what I'm here to do." And you put your ego to the side and you showed up and you killed it. You taught a bunch of kids a bunch of things that they wouldn't have learned without you.
Oh, thanks, man. I appreciate it. I appreciate the love. Yeah, like it was tough, man. Like I went from, like, in high school, at least in LCI, guys that were involved in sport, guys and girls that were involved in sport were kind of like, I don't know, the cool kids or whatever. You know what I mean? Like it went from me being like a part of a provincial winning or a zone winning basketball team, and had a bunch of my friends, play Division 1 and post secondary and all that stuff, to, well, now I got to go to the camp to just try to learn with a bunch of like 13-year-olds, right? So it's a huge ego check. But to be honest, like, I was so desperate to just learn and to learn quickly and to try to get myself ready for this walk-on tryout that it didn't really matter. Like, I just thought the information that was being given by Ken and by yourself and other pursuit volley leaders, I just thought that was information that would be valuable for me going forward, right, within the sport. So it didn't really matter what the age group was. I just wanted to try to get better within a short period of time, or try to learn something that I didn't know before, or I don't know. That was my whole mindset. And super, like, people might think, I've always got this question, like, was it embarrassing? I was like, well, like, I wasn't like hanging out with my friends, you know what I mean, that are like the same age. But I mean, those kids, I think became my friends by the end of the camp, because they're like, what is this old dude doing here? Kind of just grinding. But I didn't really care. I just wanted to go for the information, and I mean, it worked out, right? Like, if anybody's thinking, well, that's kind of weird, I wonder how it transitioned. Like, I ended up, being selected for that pursuit volley team where I met you. And
well, I think you and I actually won the tournament for that pursuit camp.
Yes, we did.
With a couple of 14-year-olds. And something that I distinctly remember was your willingness to give feedback and take feedback from 14-year-old children. And I just thought that was so cool, because you really, I think that people can demonstrate their willingness to learn by, number one, giving feedback and initiating that a relationship with reciprocity, where you're consistently giving back and forth. And a big part of that is not only giving, but also receiving, and how well you receive something like feedback, because so often it's difficult to take feedback from anyone, because an inherent part of feedback is accepting that you're wrong to some extent, or you could be better.
For
And
sure.
to hear that from a 14-year-old kid that we're playing a tournament with is something
Yeah.
completely different. But I think
Yeah.
that was the reason that our team did so well, was because we all had the ability to just say, hey, this is something that maybe I would like it if you did this, and
Yes.
everyone just
Yep.
took it like that. It was just a snap of a finger.
Yep.
And it was a very open lane of communication.
For sure, man.
So sorry
Yeah,
to cut
for
you
sure,
off,
for
but
sure.
yeah,
No, that's totally fine.
then we played together at the Pursuit Volleys.
Yeah,
And
yeah, right. Like we went to Texas and played at like the National Open, and that was incredible. Like
Mhm.
I don't know how much you want to get into this, but I remember like distinct things about that whole process, that whole week, I guess, of meeting new guys. I think I was like one of the only ACAC dudes on the team, and so I was already nervous to go into the whole experience with, right? Because whatever, I'm playing with a bunch of university dudes, and I ended up meeting like I ended up meeting Dalton Sanoski,
Mhm.
right? Who's a character in his own right, and eventually um, I ended up playing with Dalton in Sask, right? And
Mhm.
he helped me kind of transition to the little barrel roll over there. So I mean, it's all like people laugh like, oh, you play with 13-year-olds. Yeah, okay. Well, playing with 13-year-olds actually allowed me to eventually sign with the university team down the line, right?
Mhm.
And yeah, I've been reading actually. So I did this book study. Not to go on to a different tangent right away, but I
No,
did this
do it.
book study first semester with a couple of my friends. So like one guy's trying to make the Olympics for swimming. One guy's playing pro ball in Spain, pro basketball, and a bunch of actors actually. There's the one guy's brother, um, who plays in Spain. His brother is an actor in LA, and we all started doing this thing called the Artist's Way. It's like I don't even know how to. It's not like a self help book, but it's like a task oriented book.
Mhm.
And anyways, a couple weeks ago, one of the tasks was to read a book, and I started reading this book called The Inner Game of Tennis, and it's super short. And what essentially this tennis coach, who's I don't know, he's coached some of the, I guess, important figures in tennis, and he's coached people that have never played the game before. And so, what he suggests, and this is kind of what, like, bringing back to that pursuit camp, is what I've kind of learned, is that I think we're very visual learners. And so, when I was at the pursuit camp, I wasn't necessarily watching. One of the reasons I went there is because I knew, Keith West was going to be there, like an elite
Mhm.
volleyball player from Lethbridge, and I knew yourself was going to be there. So I would try to like watch you guys. And what this coach kind of requires is that, or not requires, but kind of discusses, is that when introducing someone that's completely new to a sport, or maybe that doesn't really have the tangibles, excuse me, what he does is he hit 10 forearm. He's a tennis coach, right? So he hit 10
Mhm.
forearm balls in a row, and he just asked the student to try to replicate that.
Mhm.
And the student did like the forearm perfectly, but he noticed that the tennis pro was taking a step. So he would hit the forearm perfectly, but he wouldn't take the step, because that's how like our mind works. So focused on one aspect that they
Mhm.
think, well, I'm only gonna take a step. I'm only gonna take a step, and ended up, hitting the ball perfectly. But it's that idea that instead of me telling you like this is how you pass a volleyball,
Mhm.
or this is how you dig, or this is how you set, or this is like there's 6 different things that I'm putting in your brain to like make you play. What I really tried to do is just watch how like Keith West passed the ball,
Mhm.
right? Or watched how you like defended out of 6. And so I think if there's any young guys or girls that are listening to this podcast, I think studying like film, or studying those that are superior to you, right? In terms of like your athletic skill, is super, super important to get an edge quickly. Because if you can try to replicate those movements, um, by watching pro volleyball players or university volleyball players, within a shorter period of time, I found that to be personally very, very beneficial for my own game. So
Mm-hmm.
whole different kind of tangent, but I just wanted to, because you were talking about, even reading some information about reciprocity. And in a sense, it's reciprocity of what we see to like what we actually do. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, hopefully I didn't take too much of the podcast
No, no,
time.
no. Hey, anywhere you want to go with this, I'm willing. We're both passengers, and each one of us
Mhm.
has a wheel. How do you differentiate between? Well, first off, you're totally right that we learn by watching. Some people learn by watching,
Right,
but I would say that
for sure,
it's something you could generalize to the majority of the human
for
population
sure.
because so much of our
Yep.
brain is allocated to our visual cortex almost.
Hmm.
A large chunk of the back half of our brain is all visual.
Hmm.
So that's how we learn. And uh, one hint at that is the fact that we actually have whites in our eyes. It's important what each person is looking at within a social group. We all tend
Right.
to look at things. If you
Hmm.
just go onto your university campus or school campus and look up a tree, people will come and surround you and also look up that tree because it's
Yeah,
important.
yeah.
It's important to know what other people are looking at. And so how do you differentiate between watching and studying?
Interesting. Um, so I guess watching for me is without intent. It's just kind of like if I was to watch a game on TV or watch, um, like let's keep it in the frame of volleyball, for example.
Mm-hmm.
If I was to watch a volleyball game without really worrying about the outcome or who's playing or anything like that, I'm just kind of watching the ball move. That's different than when I'm studying game film throughout the week about a team that I'm playing, right? So if I'm studying with intent, I'm freeze framing where I think the set's going, or freeze framing what is the swing, what does the swinger's arm look like, or I'm freeze framing their defensive setup, or I'm freeze framing what their two-man block looks like and where they're positioned on the court in relevance to that. So I think it's a lot more time consuming, obviously, because you're stopping and starting at like almost every 2 seconds, to try to grasp a little bit better understanding about what's happening. And if I'm watching, like let's say Dustin Wadden does a really good job, I think, of promoting the game of volleyball in terms of a reaching like a social platform.
Mm-hmm.
And so if I'm watching his games, or he did a passing and defense clinic this past summer for COVID, which I found very beneficial. But he breaks it down like incrementally. So yeah, it's very, very time consuming, and it's like your brain's turned on. It's very focused to what you want to get out of it. Um, yeah, if I'm watching a game, I'm just hanging with the guys, being like, oh, that's pretty cool that Mulaney hit, you know, got 14 kills and 10 blocks, whatever, right? Like, I don't know. That's kind of my my perception of it, I guess.
Mm-hmm. A way that I've tried to implement that into my coaching is that I want people to study the game while they're playing it. So
Right.
changing, so for a spectator, the object of focus is obviously the ball
Hmm.
in whatever sport. So if you watch basketball,
Yep.
if you're watching basketball, you watch James Harden release a three or Steph Curry release a three, and you watch the
Yep.
ball, not
Yep.
the guy. But I think
Hmm.
that if you're studying the game, then you're watching the guy more so. So
Exactly. Yep.
when I coach volleyball, I try to keep their line of vision below the height of the net so that they're
Very
watching
cool.
the other
Yeah.
team
Yep.
and their own teammates rather than watching the ball, because the ball's not going to tell you
Mhm.
anything. There's a
Yep.
split second where you need to use your peripherals to actually see where the ball's going. But for the most part, the body language of the people on the other side of the net are going to be far more beneficial to allocate your visual resources to, as opposed to the object of focus, which is very often the ball.
For sure. I like that. I like that a lot. I mean, like in serve reception, for example, like you said, the ball tells you very, very minimal things, in the sense that when I watch serve reception, I'm watching like the guy's speed. Like, does he do a split step? Like, what's happening?
Mm-hmm.
Is he passing outside his midline? Is he trying to force it inside his midline? Like, what's kind of happening? Um, sorry, the phone's gonna ring. What's happening? pre-contact almost, versus post-contact versus, after he makes contact with the ball, like what does his body position do? So that's interesting that you do. I like that. I like that analogy to keep it below the net. I like that a lot.
Thanks. It's been a work in progress, to say the least.
Yeah, that's fair enough.
What did you find the difference between college and university in terms of the way that people approached the game, the way that people approached academics, the way that people approached partying? I know that Las Vegas has quite the reputation. So.
Yeah, man. Okay, so let's talk about partying first.
Okay.
So in Lethbridge, to be honest with you, we had a bar ban, and we had, if we were going to go out, it had to be at someone's house.
Sorry, what does that mean? A bar ban? Is that through the athletic organization, or were you guys so rowdy that the bars actually had banned you?
No, sorry. Yeah, that's fair enough point. No, it wasn't. It was kind of like a team decision, I guess, kind of like from our leadership staff, that we were just, I don't know. I think if you're on a team that you guys think can be successful, the slightest little hiccup or mix up or something that like takes your focus away from trying to be successful, can often ruin those chances of accomplishing your goals. So at that time, our leadership staff kind of said, listen, if we're going to hang out, we're going to hang out as a team. And it's not going to be, at a Hudson's. It's going to be at like some guy's house. And to be honest, like that was so much, like I'm me, I'm pretty straight edge. Like I don't really drink. I don't drink, honestly. Like at that point in college, I never drank at all. I was the guy like that was driving everybody home. Like everybody needed a DD. So I don't know. I for me personally, I always felt like if I screwed up somehow on a weekend, like I'd put so much work to even like make it onto a team. Like I wasn't going to risk it by doing whatever on a weekend. And that's just how I personally, my perception on that has changed a little bit, but that's how I viewed it, at least when I was in college. So yeah, we hung out within our own houses, and it was awesome. Like it was just like probably one of the, not that you even had to be like drinking or doing anything like that. It was just being around our team, and being around like-minded individuals, and like we were all friends. That's another thing that I think is super important. It's tough when you're on a team where there's like cliques or there's little like disagreements or like that guy hates that guy because of this or whatever, right? We were all just super, super chill, and super, super close. So yeah, that's Las Vegas. We're not as glamorous as it might seem. Yeah, and then Sask was very much the same. Like, I think we had a little bit more. We were definitely academically focused. I had a guy, in this past year that got like 100th percentile on his MCAT score. So like these guys are, kicking people's butts in terms of like the general population, I think, while playing a sport, which is pretty impressive. The game itself was so much faster, and like the mentality around the game was a lot different than Lethbridge. So obviously, I think anytime that you kind of jump up a level, obviously the game's gonna be faster. And people say like, what does that mean? Well, the ball moves faster, or the guys hit it harder, whatever. But also how we approach mistakes and stuff like that differed very, very significantly compared to the Lethbridge College. And that just might be my personal experience, like with that team versus this team.
Yeah, what do you mean by that?
So I mean, in the sense that I think the ACAC or like playing at Lethbridge, if you made a mistake, I kind of took that as like a learning experience. Like, okay, this is, it cost a team a point. I better know for next time, like not to do that. But I felt as though like I could try to obtain that point back quickly. In university, it was like if you make a mistake, you're down, and you're probably going to be down because of that, because of the level of talent that's in the in youth sports, very quickly. So too many mistakes in a row is detrimental to that set. So you really, really have to be on your game. You really, really have to be consistent. And it's one of the, like, Can West for U Sport is one of the, I would argue, the most competitive conference that there is, at least in Canada. And like the level of talent that comes out of there is incredible.
I would definitely posit that that's moving into the United States as well. I think that
yes.
I think that North
I didn't,
America, Canada West might be one of the the leagues. I'd say
I
probably top
agree as
two.
well. Yeah, I agree as well. I mean, every time, the top end guys in Canada go down there, I mean, I think you're usually on the top. So that's why, you know, you have to be so consistent. And so like the approach to making mistakes is like, oh, like we can't do that right now. Like we can't have that. And so, you know, how we ended my first year at Sask, like I think we got bounced in the quarterfinals. There's so many things that could have gone our way that just didn't. Like Morty being injured for basically this whole second half of the semester. Mm-hmm. Was super detrimental to our team's success and our team morale. But yeah, it was awesome experience. I look forward to what next year brings, hopefully, if COVID stays away.
Mm-hmm. Well, I hope that it does. I am missing watching my friends play a sport that I enjoy.
Yeah.
So I hope that that's going to be something that comes back. And now with your history honors, what is why would you go into that? Why would anyone decide to look back in time? Because we're in the present and we're only going into the future. So
right,
get your eyes in the front of your head, not the back of them.
yeah. I guess that's a lot of my science friends say that often.
Do they really? Oh God.
They do. Yeah, I know it's tough.
That's not good.
But no, exactly. I don't know. I've always found that studying our past, as far back as, you know, like where we came from as a civilization, it has been so interesting. And so, you know, there's so much information to take in, and there's information that can help us, you know, provide guidance for our future, as you know, even these science people might disagree with. I 100% disagree with that statement, right? Like there's so much that we can learn. You know, nothing is ever replicated exactly the same, but there's similarities that can definitely be influential for our future. And so specifically with my education, I found like an interest in Indigenous studies, specifically within Treaty 6, which is like the Saskatchewan area, like Saskatoon area, and Treaty 7, which is Southern Alberta. And so trying to understand the relationship, how it developed, and how we can try to, I guess, foster development within that relationship between Indigenous and non-Indigenous is something that I've taken a keen interest in.
I don't want to put you on the spot. Do you know what the band names are for those groups?
Ooh, you are putting me on the spot. I don't want to get it wrong, so I'm going to say I don't. Okay. But I mean, it would be simple to, you know, to look up and see.
Maybe I'll put them into the
the bio. Like I know specifically, like Southern Alberta is Blackfoot territory. Mm-hmm. And so the Lethbridge College, you know, I think every university now within Canada, I shouldn't say, I don't know for sure, but I think there's a treaty, like we recognize treaty land. Mm-hmm. And so Lethbridge College always was like a major supporter of Blackfoot culture. And, you know, even my graduation ceremony, they had Blackfoot dancers come in and perform for us for that graduation ceremony. So I know for certain that the Blackfoot are very significant in Southern Alberta. For Saskatchewan, I'm not 100% sure. But like I said, I don't want to get it wrong, so I'll probably just cut it out.
that's probably a good way to go.
Yeah.
What have you found in history that could potentially? Actually, I'll give one, and then maybe you can think about the question while I talk about it. So, in the Amazon River Basin, there's it used to be a savanna, and in lots of parts it still is. So it's not a giant garden that's full of life as people would think. I read a book recently called America Before by Graham Hancock, and you can think what you'd like about Graham Hancock if you've heard of him, and people listening, but I think that his willingness to step outside of the mainstream scientific thought has been revolutionary for the discipline of archaeology. And one of the areas that he talks about in this book is something called terra preta or terra prima. And I think that comes from Latin terra, earth, and prima, first. So primero in Spanish is, I think, would be linked to prima. Anyways, it's this man-made dirt that has a unbelievably high nutrient content, and the microbiome is self-replicating. So if you dig deep enough in this earth, it's actually black about 2 meters down. And then below that, it becomes very sandy and inhospitable to agriculture. And that's something that the Brazilians are starting to find out as they demolish the rainforest, is that this ground is only self-replicating for as long as it can have the ecosystem that it's used to. And so they're going to get about 1 or 2 cycles out of this ground that they're what would be a good way to put this? I don't want to sensationalize or politicize it, but they're essentially destroying large portions of the rainforest to create farmland for cattle and other different forms of single crop agriculture. And I think it's going to turn around and nip them in the ass soon enough when they realize that the ground actually isn't meant for that, and it was engineered to be that way by the indigenous population that was there. And the more that they find out about the Amazon and its unexplored, undiscovered areas, that it seemed to be populated by millions and millions of people with these giant metropolis megacities. And
wow,
and so I think that that's something that could be potentially useful in the future, is reverse engineering this terra preta. And I think that the Sahara in Africa is receded by about 10% over the past, I wouldn't put a number on it, but within the past 100 years at the very least, it's receded about 10%, because we're in the green revolution. There are more trees in North America than there were 50 to 100 years ago.
Right.
And obviously that doesn't make up for the old growth deforestation that we're experiencing, which I believe is reprehensible to say the least. But I do think that we're being able to reverse engineer this terra preta and understand what the mechanisms at play are. And those scientist friends of yours, there are scientists that have postulated that maybe it's the local inhabitants were burning different types of essentially the hypothesis is that they stumbled upon this stuff, and it just seems so profoundly engineered that there's absolutely no way that someone just miraculously tripped onto their rear end and ended up in this stuff. And it's very similar to the history of ayahuasca, where this psychedelic that allows for a out of earth experience, and it comes from, essentially you take one vine from this part of the Amazon and you combine that with another plant body from this part of the Amazon, and that it inhibits the enzymes in one plant that allow for this mystical experience. And so it's unfathomable how people just stumble onto this. So I think that understanding these things a little bit more, and as I said, being able to reverse engineer terra preta into being able to create rainforests kind of wherever humans want. I think that Africa would be a little bit less food scarce if they were able to plant a giant garden, which it seems like the Amazon is more of a man-made garden than it is a natural occurring event.
Wow, very interesting.
Yeah, cool.
That's
stuff.
interesting. I've actually took several African history classes within the past year and a half, and very interesting, like the development that's happened within that continent. it's like I obviously I studied it from like a more of a like a relational standpoint of
Mhm.
colonialism, why are things are the way that they are today, and how can we try to kind of reverse that flow. Um, so yeah, it's very interesting that. When did you? So I'll turn this around then.
Sure.
So
Okay.
when did you like? I've known you. Oh gosh, I've known you since that Dallas trip. Really, I guess pursuit like 2018, 2017, something like that.
That was the first time that I'd seen my mom in about 9 years. So I
Yeah.
think that was maybe when I was 20 or 21.
Wow.
Hmm.
And so like you're quite studied within several different realms of, I guess, your education. What made you like? I remember Josh Mulaney of Dallas was quite a different person than what he is today. So what it just seems like you're very studied. What I guess like so what did you graduate with, and
Hmm.
then what's your ultimate goal, or what's your ultimate I don't know. I don't mean to turn this. I know this is
No, no,
supposed to be
no.
about
Yeah.
Prim or whatever, right? But
Well,
like, it's just it's interesting to see the development, the character development of all these years, right? Like, this is the first time we've sat down and talked in a minute.
yeah. So thank you. Very much appreciated.
No worries.
I'll have to remind myself that I'm a total piece of shit after this so that I can re-humble myself.
Oh, stop.
I studied psychology and sociology in school. I took
Cool.
business my first year, and then
Yep.
psychology was I would say maybe a brute force way to analyze myself and
Okay.
maybe come out on the other side of what I was going through.
Hmm.
And I just found it unbelievably interesting. I think
Right.
I've always wondered how to say this, because in our current political climate, it doesn't seem politically correct, but I think I'm
Okay.
far more feminine than I am masculine in terms of my
Okay.
personality and my interests. So I'm far more interested in people than I am things. I've tried to get into things multiple times, and I really do enjoy things quite a bit, but I enjoy people far more. So I think this
Mm,
is a reason that I'm doing this
interesting.
and trying to learn from that. And when I say that I'm far more feminine, it's not I'm not trying to take a stereotype or an archetype of women and say that I fit onto that. I think that I'm trying to share information in the quickest way possible. So
Right.
I think that
Okay.
from a personality psychology perspective, I think that I would skew more to the side of the averages of women, and the difference between men and women are very minuscule, very small, but they exist. And so I think that I'm a little bit skewed more towards the
Okay.
female side. And so that's me saying that so that I don't get in trouble later, hopefully.
Yeah. Yeah. Yep.
I'm so I took psychology and sociology because I'm very interested in people. And then as time went on, I decided that I wanted to get better at speaking, which I think
Okay.
was a good goal for me, because it's something that I was always I had a natural proclivity towards, that was being able to talk and convince people of things. And so over time, I realized that if I didn't have any weight to my speech and I was convincing people of things that I had simply assumed, then that wasn't ethical from my
Right.
perspective. I
Right.
wanted to understand
Not
things.
valid.
Yeah,
Yep.
exactly. I wanted to understand
Yep.
things more and more, so that when I spoke, my words held weight.
Right.
And then I just started watching tons of lectures online, and I got more and more into learning. I think it was actually during my Achilles that I became
Mm,
far more well read. Was I the the visceral feeling was that my body had given up on me, and it was something that
right.
had never happened before. And so I
Right.
realized that the pipe dreams that I had cultivated over the years to play professional and follow that stream would maybe not be there, and if it was, then it wouldn't last for forever. So that's when I
Hmm.
decided to turn far more into my mind. And it's interesting that you say that I'm more well read than I was, because I wouldn't consider myself an intelligent person
Mm,
from a traditional perspective. I think that relates back to my grade school years where I had I was diagnosed with a learning disability. And so I was consistently told that I'd never go to university or really accomplish anything on the academic side of things. So that was always something that I held as an indisputable truth, let's say. And
Interesting.
so that's definitely helped to keep me humble when I do hear people say things like that, but I very much appreciate it. It means a lot to me.
No worries, man.
And a big part of the lectures that I realized was that the people were just unbelievably well read. They just knew so much, and they could talk about things and move things around. And I think that I'm quite creative, and something that I realized with people who were well read is that they were able to take ideas from different areas and different perspectives and tie them into one another. And so listening to someone such as Joseph Campbell, who studies mythology, was able to take all of these areas from different spiritualities, and he over time wove it into this big blanket of an understanding that we now hold of religion and mythology and spirituality and all of these things that came together and were an integral part of the human experience. And so I decided that I would like to be able to do that, essentially. And so that's been my goal over the past little bit, is to essentially just read as much as I can. And another part of that ties in with the podcast, I decided that I wanted to pursue this to the utmost degree, where the nth-most degree, where I want this to be as good as I can, both for myself and the people involved, whether they're listening, hi mom, and whether they're just watching highlights or anything. I want people to actually come away from the experience of listening with more than they came in with, and being able to think about things. And so a big part of that responsibility for me is being able to consistently bring in new perspectives, while also being able to engage people such as yourself on ideas that you already hold. And so the more that, so I've talked about this before, but maybe I can explain it a little bit better this time, and a little bit better the next time after that. But I think of a conversation a little bit as a Venn diagram, where there's the information that I know, and there's the information that you know. And the more that we overlap, the more that I can get into the, you'd say, more personally esoteric information that only you know that I couldn't know. So the more that we overlap, then, or the more that I overlap into you, the more that I can explore this outside bit of you that I don't hold. So that's something that so anytime, so for example, I'm talking to a friend in a few weeks about drug addiction. And in that time, I've just been burning through books on drug addiction so that we can have a like hopefully very deep intellectual conversation, more so from his point of view. But that's my goal, is to bring as much value as I can to the people that are experiencing the journey with me. And so over time, I think that and as I said, I like speaking. And so this is a way that I can help to cultivate that skill within myself, and in that way be able to express myself better. So I hope that's I hope that's a satisfactory response to your question.
Yeah, for sure, man. It's just it's cool what you're doing. I think the betterment of oneself by whatever they are interested in, I guess. And it seems like you're interested in a breadth of information, right? And I think it's important that that you're taking the time out of your day to, like you said, like study about drug addiction, right? Whereas you could just have them on, and possibly the conversation would go nowhere if you didn't do your homework about it, right? So yeah, I think you're doing cool stuff, man. I've always found it interesting, the character development, because you've become so at least in my opinion, right? Like you might not agree with me wholeheartedly, but I think in my opinion, you've become so well read on such a variety of different topics that you're able to hold conversation with anybody, which is why I think the pod is doing well. So yeah, man, happy to see the success for you.
Much appreciated. Thank you very much. I do really appreciate that. And kind of to tie us back in, while also continuing on the tangent.
Yep.
Something like studying history, and so what I did in the tangent about Terra Preta prior to me ranting about myself, is I was trying to combine three broad facets of academia into one. So history, culture, and agriculture. And I guess you can maybe put
Right.
anthropology or archaeology
Mm-hmm.
into under the cultural umbrella. And so that's something that I think is very important, and not only is it not being encouraged, but it's being actively discouraged, is the ability to generalize. People are being more and more specified
Right.
in their academics, and rightfully so to some extent, because
Mm-hmm.
you can only learn so much. And as these fields grow larger and larger at an increasingly exponential rate, then you can only read so much. And so it's
Yep.
tough to
Yep.
really dive into a rabbit hole and be an expert in one thing. And so I think that
Mm-hmm.
something that I would like to do is be able to have a conversation of at least the first decile of a discipline. So the first 10% of a discipline. And in that way I can hopefully start to learn more
Interesting.
about the further, because if I can jump into the
Right.
first 10th% and talk to someone who knows 90%, then
Yep.
we can find somewhere in the middle where we can
That
pull
makes
that
sense.
up. So, and that's why I'm interested in talking with you about history, because
Mm-hmm.
I think history is drastically underestimated as a academic discipline now. I think that the humanities are experiencing their difficulties for a variety of reasons, but one of which
Right.
being everyone wants to go into the STEM fields. Not everyone, but
Right.
the
Yeah.
STEM
Yeah.
fields make people a lot of money, and so
Yep.
does
Yep.
yeah.
I
And
hear what you're
so,
saying.
sorry, you go.
No, I agree with you. I think one of the main interests that I have within the discipline is that it's going to sound kind of cliche or weird or whatever, but I'm really about people, and I'm one of those weird guys that like thinks that we should try to live cohesively in this world.
That sounds very weird nowadays, just
Yeah,
to let you know.
yeah, it sounds super, super weird nowadays. Um, which is, in my opinion, like it's unfortunate because like I truly care about the well-being of others, or the well-being of I don't know, like a culture or a society
Mm-hmm.
or a community, right? And I think if I can provide, not that I'm an expert in this by any means as of yet, like I'd love to attain my master's, and you know, in a specific field relating to this. But if I can provide some kind of insight or some kind of information that helps us reach that goal of cohesiveness, or at least bring about conversation, right? I think conversation is something that's uh, increasingly significant among parties that are like in disagreement, right? Um, you know, I think we can keep trying to discuss like everything that's wrong, and you know, if me and you were having or a fight, let's say, I could go to my friends and be like, "Man, Josh is such a dick. Like, I hate him. He's the worst." Da 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 da. And you would go to your friends and say, "Oh, Prim is such a dick." Da 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 da. Whatever, whatever. But the only way that we're going to work our issues out is if we sit down and talk about it, or sit down and have a conversation about um, how we can resolve this issue that's happening between us, right? So I think that's kind of where my interest within history comes from, is because, like I said before, it's not like you know, the future is going to be exactly replicated, but what's happening in the present can definitely be influenced by what's happened in the past, right? So that's kind of where my interest kind of lies, which I think we're on the same page about. So
Mm-hmm. Right. Well, even looking at the present and the influence of the past, we can also look at all of the other so many. There's a huge plethora of case studies from all over the world, different times, different cultures, different histories, where things have gone right.
correct.
And
Yep.
I don't think that it was funny. I had a conversation with a friend, and we were talking about the idea of utopia, and I
Mm.
I had this quote written down that I had been thinking of for a long time, and I have it on my whiteboard now, and it's: the only achievable utopia is within the house of a well-traveled man or women, depending
Interesting.
on
Yeah, yeah.
which way you look at it. But I
Yep.
think that the ability to take from multiple cultures the things that go well and went well and incorporate them into oneself,
Right.
and one's home being the kingdom of order. So someone who's well-traveled and has a vast experiences and a vast experience of different cultures and ideas are able to take things. So for example, I really like bidets. I think that anything besides a bidet is barbaric. And
Okay.
so that's something that it's just wiping poop around your butt with a piece of paper if you're not
Right.
using a bidet. But now in every home that I'm in, I fashion the place up with a few bidets. So that's
Okay.
a way that I've moved a little bit closer towards my utopia.
Right.
I think that being able
Right.
to personalize an experience, or to kind of, as you've said, we're able to take from multiple areas of time, and if we're able to incorporate the things that worked into our culture and our civilization, and even so, I'm gonna cite something here. Let me know what you think about it.
Okay.
I've been reading a little bit of Michael J. Chandler, and if you're unfamiliar, he's a psychologist from UBC who looked into resilience, and specifically resilience in Indigenous communities, with a magnifying glass on Indigenous youth suicide. And
Okay, cool.
yeah, so something that he found was that the Pareto distribution was evident in Indigenous youth suicides within the band. So the Pareto distribution is that 20% have 80% of the resources. So 10%
Right.
of people have 80% of resources. This is all over the place. It's in economics. It's in trophy bonding species. So like gorillas, 20% of the gorillas, 10% of the gorillas are going to have 90 to 80% of the females. And it's
Interesting.
anytime that you let nature run its course, that tends to be the distribution. And this is also within Indigenous communities with regard to youth suicide. So 10% of the bands in Canada, and I think this was from 2004, 90% or 10% of the bands hold or carry the burden of, is more appropriate, 90% of the youth Indigenous suicides. And what Chandler did was looked at the sociocultural landscape of the bands that had zero suicides and decreasingly few suicides as it ramped up to 10% holding 90%, and tried to look at what they were doing from a cultural perspective. And there were policy changes that could be implemented that would decrease the rate of suicide to such a vanishing rate that it still spins my head. It makes me very emotional to think about, for two reasons: the sadness that I feel at the pointless loss of life, and also my excitement that the research was done and that the information exists. And so that's an area of which, by looking backward and forward, we can find a policy that actually helps people. And so I'll give a few of these as an example of the things that were successful in the groups. Was self-governance and being able to have more control over the policing and surveillance of their band and their tribe. The acceptance and revivification of culture, so encouraging traditional languages and dancing and art. And I think that those things really tie in together from a resilience perspective, where you have the individual who's going to have a set of predispositions that influence them, or kind of makes it a little bit easier to follow one direction or the other. And then you have the family perspective. So the people around you are going to influence your development to a degree that we don't even, I don't think it's been properly captured by our culture, how important family is. As I was talking about earlier, the significance of a two-parent household, or that it's a lot. It helps. And thirdly, the community perspective. And so I think that what Chandler touched on, and whether he was conscious of it or not, was the intersectionality of those three things. So being able to promote cultural practices and promote self-governance was able to influence the community. And by being in a community, you're closer to your family. So the more tight knit a community is, the more tight knit your group is, the closer you get to the individual. And by having a community and a family that influences the individual to such an extent that essentially eradicated youth suicide in a lot of these bands. So yes, that's my rant. Thank you for listening. I'd like to know what you think about that, and from your historical perspective, as well as your Treaty 5 and 7?
6 and 7.
6 and 7. Thank you.
Yep, that's all right. Yeah, I think it's very interesting. I think another aspect of that is the ability to listen. Now I forget where this was. I believe it was in Manitoba on a reserve, but there was a study done that there's a significant amount of funding that was given to this reserve land in the realm of like a social activity bonding kind of infrastructure that was going to be in place. And so essentially the youth were pulled in the community, and all they wanted was a place to create music. And the government at that time frame was allocating the money or the funds for a rec center instead. And so they really wanted to cut down on crime. They thought, the reserves there were having, massive issues with drugs and alcoholism. And so they had an expert go in, and the expert reported back that these youth just wanted a place to create music. But eventually the rec center was built, and within, 3 months, a shortened period of time. I shouldn't put a number on it either, but a shortened period of time, the rec center was not being used, was actually being vandalized, and crime had not decreased in any regard regarding the youth. And so I think what I'm kind of getting from both of these instances is that there has to be, an open ear or a willingness to listen to what the actual needs of the community is. Because I think there's so many times in which I might think that I'm right in a situation, or we could be talking about whatever, and I know, like, if I don't truly listen to what you are saying, then we're not really having a conversation. It's just me speaking words and you speaking words, and nothing is being created or resolved. And so there's a lot of times in which the government, I think, speaking generally again, governments across the world often think that they know what's best for people, because this is what they've been educated, this is what they've been taught. But like you said, like that collective aspect, or like the community, or shared living, there's so many aspects that kind of go against non-Indigenous ideology that we, as a non-Indigenous person, our society might think that is wrong, quote unquote. When in reality, there's, they've been living as a civilization, Indigenous people living successfully as a civilization way before colonial contact, right? So I don't know, I just think, to go back to, like what I'm studying and what I'm interested in, it's about creating that cohesiveness in that shared space, right? And whatever that looks like, I think it really just boils down to like that open communication aspect, and more studies, being presented to showcase, non-Indigenous people might have it wrong in regards to these issues, and oftentimes they do.
Yeah, well, in lots of ways we do. I've been trying to think about how to approach these conversations, and less so the ones that are less political, and more so the ones that are political, in my understanding of being right and being truthful. I think that I'm right as often as I am, but I also know that I'm wrong more often than I think.
Right.
So something that I'm trying to do when I talk to people about political issues, and especially sensationalized issues, is understand that I'm not trying to be right in any conversation that I have, but I'm trying to seek the truth. And if you and I both have a
very cool
a conversation in which we're both giving each other the benefit of the doubt that it's a argument in good faith or a conversation in good faith, that I'm just saying what I think is true in my personal perspective, and you tell me what you think is true from your personal perspective and the research that you've done, then maybe you and I can essentially stumble upon something that is actually true, or at least a small nugget of it, because
Right.
the truth it's probably out there. It's probably quantifiable. We could probably find it, but I don't think that happens by talking to people that you agree with or believing
Right.
that you're
Exactly.
inherently right. So
yeah,
something
because that same, sorry to cut you off, but like that same
no.
narrative just continues the cycle, right? Like if I only talk with like-minded people, well, of course I'm going to think I'm right, because like we have no one to disagree with, right? So I could talk about same thing with religion. Like I'm a religious guy, but if I have multiple friends that are non-believers, atheists, agnostic, whatever, like a variety of different kind of religions. If I don't truly listen to what they're saying or listen to what their belief system is, well, of course I'm just going to continue to think like, well, I just got it right, I nailed it the first try, right? Like I don't know, I just think it's not worth having a conversation in which I have a predetermined answer to whatever they say. It's not worth it. Like what's the point of having that conversation, right? And I think that's something that I had to, it's something that I was brought up with, that understanding, but it's something that was reinforced within a lot of these quote unquote liberal institutions, such as the University of Lethbridge, right? Like there's a lot of beneficial courses there that teach you to, especially within the history departments, which is why I kind of fell in love with history, is because they're looking at it objectively. It's not with a like history and study is about looking at things just as they were, or just as they or how they're progressing. It's not about taking into consideration, or what it should be, I guess. I'm sure there's obviously bias in the history that we read, but as a historian, it's my job to analyze that as objectively as possible. And I always found that fascinating about it, because you're not having an agenda before you. So
yeah, I think that's a very good way to put it, is not having an agenda or a goal of the area in which we're going to land on. I think it's a lot more fun to kind of dance through it rather than being dogmatic about the things that are right and wrong. And as you said, with the access to music for the particular band that you were discussing in Manitoba, that we are often wrong about things. And that's something that I'm reading a lot about in this book by Gabon Mate. He's a Canadian doctor from East Hastings in Vancouver, so the highest density of drug users in Canada. And I'll be talking about this a lot more with Owen in the next few weeks, but he really tears down the war on drugs and talks about just how wrong we've gotten that, and the negative impact it's having on the people that it is having an impact on, and the small, if any, positive outcomes it's having. And I think it's difficult for people to look back at things and say they were wrong. So there's also a unwillingness to admit one's own wrongdoings in the past if it's led to suffering. And that's something that people have really ended up digging a hole for themselves, and that they don't want to be wrong. And so you just continue to double down on things and double down and double down. I recently went to a Republican rally down here, and
oh wow,
yeah, well, I like to go to both. So I like to go to Democrat and Republican rallies and I just stand at the back of the room, and I'll clap. I'll clap occasionally if I hear something that I actually do agree with. But for the most part, I'm trying to understand a little bit more about the two different parties and how they think from for lack of a better word, from an archetypal perspective. So if you have a Republican and the ideal framework for Republican and the ideal framework for a Democrat, if the people that are speaking as the people running for governor or senator, if those values are encapsulated in those people, then, and they're being voted in, then you could insinuate that those people are holding the general feeling of the people that are voting for them.
Right.
And the amount that people clap for different things, or you see standing ovations for some comments and not for others. And so I'm really trying to gauge what the difference between people is and what the difference between ideas are. And more people are refusing to look across the aisle towards one another, especially in these parties where they're refusing to have conversations. And I think that would actually, I think that could be the best thing to ever happen to politics is podcasting, to be honest. Because I think if I'm Republican and I'm very far right leaning, and I have a discussion with a Democrat that's very far left leaning, and we have a good faith conversation where we're not trying to be right, but we're trying to find the truth, then you and I just talk for 2 hours. So hypothetically, you're a Republican, I'm a Democrat, vice versa, whatever you want to put it as. I can't hide from you for 2 hours behind my ideology. I have to actually, over time, I'm going to start to spit out what I actually think and where I'm actually landing. And I think if people are able to access archived videos of people having discussions or archived audio of people having discussions about important issues, then, sorry, 1 sec, my dog keeps, what do you want? She's crying back here. So I think that if people are able to just have conversations across the aisle and are forced to have conversations and debates across the aisle, then it's going to bring those people closer together, because fundamentally I think that we're far more similar than we are from different. And the more that we think we're different from another, the more we devolve into a tribalism that we're seeing now, where you're either this or that. There's no in between. There's no middle ground. And if you're not this, you're that, and that's the enemy.
I like that. Yeah. I think, have you ever watched what's it called? Like, there's a channel in Canada that's like dedicated to what's happening within within Parliament. So I forget what it's called. It's like a specific thing, but it showcases like the discussions that are happening, and it's like continuous, and it's for the whole time. And one of the things that always stuck with me, I forget where I learned it, but during these Parliament hours or these parliamentary discussions, it's like, some of them, you can look at any parliament across the world. They're like these heated discussions of I'm right, you're wrong, this, that, whatever, like, almost coming to blows. And one of my professors once told me that, or it could have even been in high school, that these individuals, like these members of parliament, would often just like go to a local bar after and like share a drink with each other, even though they're like totally different parties, right? Like totally, like they're just crossing party lines. Like that's, but the perception to what I see on TV or what we see in the news often is like these people hate each other. It's stringent. They're not budging anything, and they truly hate each other. But then in reality, like they're down at the local pub, just like sharing a pint, because they're people, right? And they understand that this is just like what they have to portray for the public. So yeah, I don't know. I think if that was more aware, or like if more people understood that it doesn't have to be as strict as right and wrong, I think that'd be I think we would have a better world, to be honest with you.
Well, we'd get a little bit closer, to say the least.
Yes, exactly.
All right, I think that's a reasonable place to end. I think that's a good natural conclusion. Graham, I really appreciate you coming on. I
no worries, man.
I had a lot more fun than I thought I was going to. I woke up a little bit groggy this morning, so, and that's not a slight to you. Maybe that's a slight to
no worries.
Being underestimating of the amazing capacity of people. So thank you very much.
For sure. No worries, man. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.